Today our focus is Corvus Corax, so forgive my enthusiasm as well as this video's length. Corvus Corax would find himself, in all the adversity that assailed him, to be the unwavering, uncompromising avatar of justice. The Deliverer would live up to his name, being a hero that would guide the innocent to the light while using the darkness to strike down all who would victimize them. Something we haven't mentioned much is that the Emperor's sons were all imbued with certain abilities upon conception, some being readily apparent, others to be found through strife and self-discovery, most still being unknown. Corvus would prove to be significantly more adept at honing these abilities, more so than any of his brothers. When the 20 Primarchs were scattered to the vast reaches of the galaxy, the planets they landed on shaped the gods or the demons that they would become. Corvus's pod slammed into a tunnel under the surface of a dreary slave colony on the moon Kavar. Kavar orbited the forge planet of Lycaeus, being exploited primarily for minerals and labor. Corvus would be raised in secret by the slaves populating Kavar, his arrival seen as an omen to their freedom. Discovering his supernatural abilities almost immediately, Corvus found that he could overpower the mind of any mortal, rendering himself invisible. Corvus would take no time maturing into what can best be described as John Rambo reaching apotheosis. Under the tutelage of the enslaved, he learned the virtues of justice, freedom, and dignity that are so often condemned in this universe. He was then taught the tenets of patience and subterfuge, foregoing half-assed glory, instead vying for the perfect opportunity to strike at the throat of his captors. Corvus made a promise ironclad to his people, a vow that he would set them free from their torment, earning his nickname, the Deliverer. Each passing day he planned his revolution, and finally, at long last, he would see the exposed jugular of his subjugators. I often phrase these in third person for convenience, but I want to take you behind the eyes of a warden in this scenario. Imagine with me. As your shift nears its end, you call down a dark corridor toward your fellow guard as they've suddenly stopped conversing with you. You receive no reply. Once more you shout, once again answered by eerie silence. As you ready your weapon and move down the hall, you see a shadow moving from the corner of your eye. You spin around on your heels, trying to face the origin of this blur, but you see nothing. You call on your radio for assistance, but nobody answers. Channel 1, 2, 3. You keep flipping through as sweat begins to bead on your brow, but only the coarse sound of static replies to you. Once again, the shadow flickers on the edge of your vision. Once again, you fail to find its source. In a burst of movement, you abandon your post, hoping to break from this paralytic aura of uncertainty that surrounds you. Clambering into a sprint, you begin the frantic search for anyone that can reassure you this must be kind of a sick practical joke. But every guard post, every crow's nest, every checkpoint you cross is completely devoid of the life that once teemed within them. Your world has been rendered empty. Your only companion, the deafening silence that surrounds you, only broken by your shallow, panicked breath. The shadow has returned. You find yourself within its shade now. With a stomach full of dread, you turn to face the silhouette of a lean figure with long draping hair, black as pitch, blocking out the sun above you. The last sensations you know, the faint whir of a blade slicing through the air, and the cold grip of death's hand. That was the experience on Kavar the day that Corvus broke his companions free of their bonds. This was not enough, however, as death's sweet release would be delivered en masse by nuclear hellfire upon the surface of Lycaeus. Corvus and his compatriots had freed their moon, but Lycaeus still housed its oppressors. Fortunately, Kavar was in proximity to a storage facility for a readily available orbital bombardment used to make the leaders of Lycaeus surrender. In the initial stage of the barrages, an ethereal figure would arrive. It was the Emperor of Mankind himself. Something happens here in this meeting that needs to be stressed above all other details of the story. Corvus was immediately told about the influence of warp-born chaos, and even expressed prior awareness of it. The Emperor didn't let anybody know shit about Dick when it came to chaos, and Corvus got to hear about it after knowing the guy for an hour. It speaks massive volumes to the trust the Emperor had within him over a shocking amount of his brothers, and the reason for this will be revealed later. The Emperor then gave a when you're ready sort of deal to Corvus, so that he may finish his work on Kavar and Lysaeus, most likely to teach him a lesson that was soon to come. Corvus would learn a horrible lesson about civilian casualty that day, after skull-fucking the planet's slave masters into capitulation with aforementioned nuclear barrages. He then proceeded to have the Emperor's robot friends take over Lysaeus, rename it Deliverance, reform a watchtower into a fortress called the Ravenspire, and claim it as his legion's home turf. All in all, after this, he's pretty much one of the most compassionate Primarchs, abhorring innocent collateral damage. Legions at the arrival of their Primarchs are typically separated into two classes. You have the Terran or Earthborn members that were there prior to the Primarch's return. Then you have the recruits from the Primarch's planet of choice. Corvus fucking despised his Terran-born members, as they had more in common with the oppressors of Kavar than the Raven Guard he envisioned. They were too rooted in tactics of oppression and brutality, and he had no tolerance for it, so he would throw them on wild goose chases to get them as far away from his worthwhile recruits as possible. Some may see this as him being unfair to the Terran-born forces, but trust me when I say they absolutely earned that treatment. Corvus and his new Raven Guard were masters of unconventional warfare, using unprecedented guerrilla and sabotage tactics to conquer enemy forces. This was and still is a form of warfare completely unique to the Raven Guard. They are so effective at crippling enemies. Corvus beat the Lord of Supply Lines himself, Robert Gila-Monster, 3 times in a row in a simulation. If you're unaware, being capable of besting Gilly in a simulation based upon supply lines, back-to-back no less, it's like beating a fish in a water-breathing contest. It just doesn't really happen. For the sake of time, because Corvus gets intense towards the end of this, I'll make a final note on the Raven Guard, then we will bookmark them for later. The most defining events in Raven Guard history were the massacre at Istvaan V and the sabotage of their gene seed. They had their legion all but wiped out in the traitor's ambush of Istvaan, but in a way, it served to strengthen them in the future. And there was an attempt at replenishing the 19th, but it was sabotaged by the Alpha Legion, simply because it was their time to be jobbers, and the Alpha Legion really needed a win. It did, however, lead to the creation of the Raptors chapter, and dear God are those greed men good at their jobs. They're so secretive the Space Vatican doesn't even know where they come from. Anyway, as a result of the newfound lack of members, they were forced to be even more proficient in stealth. No longer being able to rely on numbers, they needed to perfect their abilities, and they absolutely did. They became artists in the form of systematically weakening a target in order to deliver a singular, devastating killing blow. The Raven Guard would soon be defined as a force that brought planets under their control before the enemy even knew they had arrived. In a quote, "Wherever you tread, tread lightly, for we are closer than you think, and our blades are sharp." So, while everyone was dying, what was Corvus doing on Istvaan? Well, I'm glad you asked. Remember when I said Corvus is one and the same with justice? From this point on, he will be synonymous with vengeance. When Corvus gets pissed, it's scary. Not Conrad, ooh, spooky scary. It's not even John Wick's dog scary. It's, what the hell is a Ghost Rider, and why is he so upset with you scary? Corvus told his entire legion, wrap it up and get the hell out of Dodge, boys, 'cause Daddy's gotta ventilate some faces. Sprinting headfirst into Lorgar's word-bearers, he left a trail of dismembered Marines in his wake, described as a carpet of gore. Lorgar took offense to Corax killing hundreds of his sons every 30-odd seconds, and charged in to fight him. Surrounded by an enemy legion, Corax spared not a singular fuck dog-walking his brother. The fight best summed up by saying Corvus hatefully fought to kill, as Lorgar merely fought to survive. Ripping Lorgar's face apart, he would then disembowel him and begin to carve Lorgar in half. Screaming in agony, he would desperately headbutt his brother to no avail. Corvus's nose would be shattered, but it only incensed him further, and Lorgar would wail as the raven's talons tore his insides apart. As he finally loosed his brother, he would raise his hand to deliver the final blow to his pleading victim, but find it caught by Conrad Kurz. Always envious of Corvus being a better version of him, Conrad really wanted this fight to happen. There's a lot of theories as to who wins in a fight between the two. As a fan of both, I sort of have an answer. Conrad is a wild card when it comes to Primarch fights. There's nothing definite because anyone has a chance to beat him, but he's also got a chance to beat them. However, Conrad himself admits that Corvus is just better than him, so we're going to go ahead and take his word for it. Corvus used his flight pack to get out of Conrad's grip, as he wasn't going to fight a fresh Primarch, wounded Primarch, 2 entire legions, and the subsequent legions behind them with a single wrist blade. Upon lifting his failure of a brother back up from the ground, Conrad would look upon the carnage his brother caused, and couldn't help but be a little impressed by Corvus. After Istvaan, Corvus was twisting in the wind trying to rebuild his legion during the civil war that followed, so he wasn't very active. When the Alpha Legion corrupted the Raven Guard's gene seed, the new Marines got corrupted with Chaos's influence, and Corvus had to kill those sons personally. A task that would rack him with guilt, as they committed no transgression, and they were still his sons, but they were tainted with chaos. Chaos Corvus was sworn to destroy. Thus, they had to be culled. Corvus locked himself in the Ravenspire for a year, so he may grieve his misbegotten sons, as well as all those who died on Istvaan. One day after that year had passed, he would emerge and fly straight into an access to the warp known as the Eye of Terror. This is a realm that's entirely chaotic, containing the planets under the purview of the now demon Primarchs. Corvus would be assumed dead after years of absence, but whispers of the Raven Lord persisted, whispers that would soon escalate into the screams of the damned. 10,000 or so years passed, and Lorgar has become a Prince of Chaos undivided, a supercharged Primarch given favor from all 4 Chaos gods. He would also be given a planet named Sikaris to do with what he pleased in the Eye of Terror. A towering golden figure with living runes flowing about his body, he's able to act with relative impunity as he's not a slave to any particular god of chaos. While Lorgar was in his bedroom kicking his feet in the air and, writing fan fiction or whatever the hell Lorgar does, one of his sons was making an altar for him. This son, Kalta would make the horrible decision to start building this shrine through the use of slave labor. You can see where this is headed. Everything was going according to plan, but strange happenings started befalling the word-bearers. The corpses of Chaos Marines would be discovered missing all of their limbs, armor shredded to ribbons, all of this seemingly done while they still drew breath. This would become a frighteningly common occurrence across Sikaris, entire regiments decimated, reduced to viscera in moments. This would soon be attributed to an unbound demon loosed upon its surface. Little did the word-bearers know, there were no demons coming, only a reckoning. Soon there would be rumors of a lean figure, cloaked in feather and shadow amongst the slaves, sent from the heavens to be their savior. Kalta soon caught wind of these tales and demanded retribution. Thinking a lowly servant responsible for this demon tearing his brothers to pieces, he would gather a group of slaves, threatening inhumane punishment upon them if he was left without answers. As fate would have it, he would soon get his answer, and he would come to deeply regret such a request. Kalta raised his hand to strike down a slave in anger, but he realized their gaze was no longer transfixed upon him. Baffled that anything could avert their eyes from their own executioner, he would turn to see what had gotten their attention. And then he saw it. The demon. a pillar of pure darkness looming in the distance. He wasn't sure if this creature was real or a figment of his imagination, caused by rumors run rampant. As it seemed to flicker in and out of existence, he would begin to notice something. This mirage had been gradually approaching him. Curiosity would turn to concern as he watched the entity reach the temple's guards. The shade shattered into a dizzying swarm of ravens and blades, enveloping his fellow Chaos Marines. Horrified, Kulta R can only watch as the demon lifts the Marines into the air, first severing the shins, the thighs, the hands, then the arms. This creature wasn't killing. This entity was torturing. Killing was simply a byproduct. It wanted these Marines to experience agony down to their last moments, as if delivering some sort of unholy penance upon them. Kulta R did the only thing he could do. He ran. He would then flee to the only hope he had left on this world, a portal to his Primarch's sanctum, praying for absolution while he retreated. When Kulta R arrived, the sight his brothers would behold was a harrowing experience. They would observe a pitch-black pool form underneath one of their own, onyx tendrils grasping out, crumpling their brother like paper, as every snapping bone was transmitted through his Vox system. Reducing the guard to a sopping, bloody heap, the swarm would collect itself back into a living silhouette approximating a human. Wings unfurling from its back, razor-sharp talons emerging from its arms, it strode through the oncoming fire as if it were nothing more than rain, devouring every round in shadow. Lightning would arc out of the figure's arms, instantaneously felling any legionary it touched. And finally, as if awoken from a nightmare, the Word-Bearer's Primarch would arrive to answer their son's prayers. Upon his arrival, Lorgar would tell us what we're all expecting at this point. This was no demon. This was Corvus Corax, fully ascended to his true form as a warp-born creature. Corvus was no longer a hand of vengeance. He was now wrath incarnate. Whether it was his time in the Ravenspire or his time in the warp that taught him, one thing reigned true. He had realized that his place in the universe was to hunt down his brothers that fell to chaos and extinguish them. And he intended to start with the architect of it all, Lorgar. We're skipping the massive fight here as I've gone on for a while, so here's the important notes. He beats a demon Primarch reinforced by all 4 Chaos Gods on the demon's home planet while getting shot by a regiment of Space Marines. Sorry, Chaos Marines, whatever, you don't care. I truly think that Corvus Corax is too goddamn angry to die. Also, it's a common misconception, Corvus is not a demon Primarch. He discovered his powers on his own in the warp. Snapping us back to reality, if you like Corvus, most people are going to call you an edgelord, but it won't matter. Why? Well, because you picked the best Primarch. Am I biased in that statement? Yes. However, I'm also right. Who's competing with a living shadow propelled by violence that's on his God of War 3 arc? Is it the Grim Reaper held together by boiled egg farts? Or is it the blue guy collecting losses to demon Primarchs like they're Infinity Stones? Maybe it's Clifford the Big Red Child Abuser? No, not him. How about Clifford the Big Red Child Abuser Part 2? Yeah, I didn't think so. Well, that's the extent of what I got for you today. Maybe you can see how he made his way up the rank in favoritism. In other news, you should go watch the other Primarch videos, or join the Discord server so you can vote on finalists. It's also good if you simply have general Warhammer questions that you want answered. Otherwise, as usual, thanks for stopping by, and have a good night.